Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for some more attendees to join us. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Christy Prescott with Eversource Energy. I'm the manager of renewable power contracts here at Eversource, and I'm happy to welcome you to the Year 7 LREC ZREC RFP webinar. Today we'll be providing you a program overview of the LREC ZREC program. Our goals for the meeting are as follows. We'd like to familiarize you with the overall LREC ZREC RFP requirements, provide you with an update on the status of years 1 through 6, and provide a summary of the procurement process that's utilized to select projects. As a reminder, we will be taking presentation questions, but you need to submit your questions via email only. You should submit those questions to our email address at lrec.zrec@eversource.com. Please do not submit questions via the GoToWebinar. Only emailed questions will be addressed. We'll be providing a master list of all questions and answers that were not addressed during the presentation. And answers that were not addressed during the presentation will be sent to all webinar participants if applicable. As a reminder, the standard contract is the controlling document. In the event of any inconsistency between the provisions of the LREC ZREC RFP or any part of this presentation, the provisions of the standard contract are controlling. Bidders should review the standard contract and all associated documents thoroughly and submit their bids based upon the standard contract, which will solely govern the transactions between the selected bidder and their counterparty company through the term of the resulting contract. I'm going to provide you with a little bit of a summary of Eversource's program results to date. Today, there are approximately 1,700 active LREC ZREC contracts in the Connecticut Light and Power Service territory. The price per renewable energy credit has gone down significantly over the 6 years of the program, as you can see it from the chart above. That means that the average selected bid price has gone down, indicating a trend in the bidder's price per REC has been less each year for ZREC. You can see in the chart above that starting with the average price per year 1 for LREC and large and medium ZRECs, and the resulting price for the small, which is the average selected of the mediums. And you can see a trend in the chart above provides you a summary for years 1 through 6. This chart is really meant to provide you some factual information of the selected projects over time. We get a lot of questions from bidders as to where they should be submitting bids and what bid price. We're just providing you this information for historical trend purposes. We don't provide bid price information to you and tell you what you should bid, although there is a ceiling price, which we'll get into later, which is the highest price that we'll accept for a bid price.
Good morning, this is Katarina Miller from United Illuminating. As you can see on the following slide, number 6, we have currently 402 active projects to date. For LREC, for us, the prices went actually up. For LREC, it was $42.80. For ZREC, large ZREC was $81.56, medium ZREC $90.33, and small ZREC $99.37. And now I'm going to hand it over to Laura.
All right, so I'm going to discuss some of the key changes for the Year 7 RFP. These are very, very important, and I'm already anticipating that we're going to get a number of questions on them. I'm going to go over them briefly, and I think we'll discuss them in detail throughout the presentation. So the first key change is that there's only one RFP. As you guys remember, probably last year there were 2. However, this year there will only be one RFP. So the RFP that's currently open with both the companies right now is the only one that there will be for the Year 7 RFP. New construction projects are now required to submit an interconnection application receipt along with their bid, and any project that fails to do so when it's required will be disqualified. We'll get into that again a little later. Our ZREC price cap is set at $126 per REC. That's the ceiling price that can be bid for LREC and ZREC technologies is $126. Only one bid per revenue meter, regardless of category, will be allowed during this solicitation. And there are now 2 6-month extensions available to customers beginning in the Year 7 RFP. So new construction projects, as I mentioned, are now required to submit a copy of the confirmation receipt issued by the Distributed Resources Group at the respective company, which states that an interconnection application and payment for such application have been received by the company for that specific project, and that receipt is required during the bidding process. This is a major change from the previous years of the program. So again, if there are any questions on this, please email them to lrec.zrec@eversource.com. We'll try and go over them while we're going through the presentation. What this means for bidders who are submitting bids for new construction projects. A new construction project, as you all know, is a project where there is no revenue meter currently at the location. So you must first submit and pay for an interconnection application before you submit your bid in the LREC program. This documentation is required at the time the bid is submitted. If a new construction bid is submitted without this paperwork, it will be disqualified as it will be deemed incomplete. Again, you will not be able to submit the paperwork after your bid is submitted. If a new construction bid is submitted without this paperwork, it will be disqualified for being incomplete. There will be no opportunity to submit the paperwork after the bid has been submitted. If multiple new construction bids are submitted at the same site address, each bid must submit its own unique confirmation receipt. Now for the price caps. The authority's ruling on motion 120 in docket 11-1206 lowered both the LREC and ZREC price caps to $126 per rec. So that means that the maximum bid price that anyone can submit is $126. Any bid price over those amounts in their respective categories will result in disqualification of the bid. The next key change for the Year 7 RFP is the clarification surrounding the number of bids that may be submitted for a given revenue meter during a given funding period. This has been clarified, and only one bid, regardless of category, may be submitted in a given funding period. If multiple bids behind one revenue meter are received, the lowest price bid, regardless of category meaning LREC or ZREC, will be evaluated and all others will be disqualified. Projects that receive contracts in the Year 7 RFP and beyond, if applicable, will now be eligible for 2 6-month extensions to the automatic termination date, which will allow a total of up to 24 months from the delivery term start date for the project to go in service. Additional performance assurance in the same amount originally posted will be required for each such extension request as well. And this has remained unchanged from the last couple of years. We wanted to include it just to give you guys the information. Residential applicants no longer qualify for the LREC program. Any project that is or will be residential must first apply to the Connecticut Green Bank, and only if they receive an incentive application denied letter from the Green Bank stating that they do not meet their residential criteria will you be allowed to submit a bid in the LREC program. Any questions regarding this should be directed to smallsolar@ccgreenbank.com. Again, this remains unchanged from the past couple of years. We're just including it as an FYI.
Procurement process. It is competitive solicitation for Year 7. Once again, I wanted to remind everyone that there is a REC price cap at 126. As you can see, small ZREC is still in progress for both of the companies. The budget for Year 7, there is prospective budget posted on this slide for Eversource, and for LREC it's $3.2 million, for large ZREC $1.66, medium ZREC, and for UI, LREC is $800,000, LREC large ZREC is $266, and medium ZREC is $266. Small ZREC is $266, but once again, this is not included in this RFP. LREC and ZREC eligibility. must be located behind contracting utility revenue meter and have a dedicated REC meter, must not have received grants, rebates from Connecticut Green Bank, as was stated earlier by Laura, unless they have incentive application denied. Project must be in service on and after July 1, 2011, must be eligible to qualify for Class 1 renewable projects, and must certify site control with bid certification form. Just wanted to remind everyone the certification form for UI was updated, and so please use the updated version that has been posted on the website. LREC ZREC eligibility. LREC is no larger than 2,000 kW, must have low emission, may include fuel cells and other low emission Class 1 resources. ZREC no larger than 1,000 kW, must have zero emissions, and may include solar, hydro, and wind. Request for proposal. We have this RFP covers LREC projects and ZREC projects, open to customers and developers. Projects will be selected and utilities will enter into a 15-year contract to purchase the ZREC and LREC from selected projects. Key program documents, RFP standard contract, solicitation plan, and your decision docket 11-1206. If you have any question, once again, direct it to the email that is listed in this presentation. Year 7 RFP schedule, as you can see, the most important thing, please be on the lookout for emails from us on around October 8th for notification of selection. Between the bids due to selection notification, winning bidders, we will send emails for eligibility review. Quantity and value of RECs. The contract price of RECs from zero emission units is capped at $126, as mentioned earlier. So in this example, you can see pretty detailed calculations how all of the incentives and what amount you would be receiving after generating RECs. And I will hand it over to Laura.
We received a question in our inbox. The question is an interconnection application receipt required if the ZREC project is being submitted behind an existing Eversource revenue meter? And the answer is no. The only time that the interconnection receipt is required is if you're submitting a bid for a new construction project. And new construction is defined in the contract and in our bid instructions form. But essentially, if the project does not, if there's no current revenue meter at the location, that would be a new construction project. So only if you're submitting a new construction bid will you be required to submit the interconnection receipt. All right. Instructions for bid submission in contract execution and management. I will go through the first half, and then I'll pass it off to Aaron Devauskas, who will go through the second. The first step is how to submit a bid in the Year 7 RFP. To submit a bid for the RFP, you must complete and submit the bid forms available on our respective websites as shown on this screen. There are certifications, affidavits, and disclosures, and other documents that may be required depending on the specifics of your project or bid. The bid certification form is mandatory for all bids and is 4 pages long. It must be completed and submitted as one single PDF at the time of bid submission. The Connecticut Licensed Professional Engineer certification is only required if you choose to enter a different average annual production than the one that's automatically calculated during the bid process. If you do so, it must be supported by a calculation approved by a Connecticut Licensed Professional Engineer. The approved calculation must be submitted as a PDF at the time of bid submission. If the project or any other project at the same site have applied for or received any Connecticut Green Bank, SEPIA, or CCES grants and or rebates, a written description must also be attached to the bid, so we know and we're aware of it. We appreciate you guys doing that. The respective company's online bidding systems will acknowledge the receipt of each bid. You'll receive an email that that states that the bid has been submitted. The Eversource bid form is filled out online. It contains information necessary for the verification of the information submitted, along with information that's input into any resulting contract. The bid certification form is required with every bid, and additional certifications, affidavits, and/or disclosures may be required as well, depending on the specifics of the bid. We strongly suggest that you double and triple check the information being submitted for all bids to avoid errors which may invalidate the bid, and to avoid errors on any resulting contract. The UI bid form is available online and must be submitted electronically. The bid certification form is required with every bid, and additional certifications, affidavits, and/or disclosures may be required as well, depending on the specifics. These bid forms are now required as an attachment to page 5 of the online bid. Is that still correct, Katarina?
Yes.
Okay. The bid ID assigned to the user must be noted in these forms as well for UI. And again, please, please, please double and triple check the information before you submit it to us.
I just would like to add, try to have at least 2 contact email information, because just in case one email doesn't work or is entered incorrectly, we just want to make sure that we are able to contact you.
The bid certification form, which is required with every bid, is a 4-page document and requires 3 signatures. The first page is instructions for completing the form. The second page requires the signature of the bidder. The bidder is the individual or business typing the information into the online bid form. Page 3 requires the signature of the contract counterparty. This is the legal entity entering into the standard contract, otherwise known as the seller. Page 4 requires the signature of the owner of the project site. This signature must be witnessed by a notary public and documented as such. This form must be submitted as one single PDF at the time of bid submission. And please note that the individual or business who signs each page of these forms must correspond exactly with the information typed into the online bid form. The bidder, counterparty, and owner of the project site that are listed on the form and ultimately sign the bid certification form must match exactly to the information that's entered in the online bid. Keep that in mind, because that's the majority of our eligibility issues, is trying to figure out which party to go to use in the bid process. Just make sure, again, that the entities that sign that form match exactly to what you're typing in the online bid form. If your project meets the Connecticut Manufactured Research or Developed definition as outlined in section 2.4.4.3 of the RFP, 2 affidavits are required. The first is the bidder affidavit that the project is using Connecticut Manufactured Research or Developed generation technologies. It must constitute no less than 50% of the total value of generation technology to be used by its project. And the second is the technology supplier's affidavit that it supplies Connecticut Manufactured Research or Developed technologies. Both of these forms must be filled out completely and submitted at the time of bid submission. If the project meets the Connecticut Manufactured Research and Developed definition, the submission of both of these affidavits will result in the bid for a project being discounted by 10% for evaluation purposes. For example, a $100 bid for a project that meets the in-state criteria would be evaluated using a bid price of $90, and the seller would still receive $100 per REC under the contract if selected for a contract. Gives you a 10% advantage in the bid. The company's bid forms automatically calculate the average annual production of a project based on the project size and the capacity factors from the most recent Connecticut Integrated Resource Plan. However, if a bidder wishes to use an alternate capacity factor than the one from the Connecticut IRP, the bidder may choose to submit a Connecticut Licensed Professional Engineer certification. Additionally, a professional engineer certification is required if the bidder is using a technology that does not have a defined capacity factor in the IRP, or the bid combines multiple technologies. If there are questions regarding this, please submit them to LREC@eversource.com, or if they're in the UI territory, LREC.ZREC@uinet.com. We're happy to answer the questions. If you're on the fence about it and you don't know whether you need a professional engineer certification or not, send us an email and we will be happy to clarify for you. Single axis and dual axis tracking solar systems are also now available in our bid form. So if you have one of those technologies, you can choose that during the bid process. The same as last year, Eversource requires that a copy of pages 1 and 2 of the customer bill be submitted with each bid that's not designated as new construction. This helps make the eligibility process much smoother for all parties. And you'll see on the screen that's an example of one of our customer bills. UI also requires that pages 1 and 2 are submitted as an attachment to, there's a typo on that screen, I apologize, but to all UI bids that are not new construction. As stated previously, all new construction projects are now required to submit a copy of the confirmation receipt issued by the Distributed Resources Group at the respective company, stating that an interconnection application and payment for such application have been received by the company for that specific project during step 6 of the bidding process. On the screen is an example of what such documentation may look like from Eversource. Again, if there's any questions regarding new construction, please submit them to our.zrec@eversource.com. We know that this is a big change. We're happy to discuss this during the presentation. UI has the same requirement for new construction projects, and documentation will also be required to be submitted at the time of bid submission. To select bids for each category, the companies will rank bids from lowest to highest evaluated bid price, and we will award contracts until our budget for that category is committed. Any project that is not awarded a contract in the initial selection round will be placed in the standby queue, and if funding becomes available due to projects terminating or choosing not to execute the contract, it will be allocated to the next bid in the standby queue for that category until the budget is committed. Bids in the standby queue expire when the companies file their respective final procurement plans. How to proceed if your bid is selected. The first step is executing the contract and providing performance assurance. The contract will be sent via email to the bid contact and the alternate bid contact as specified on the bid form at submittal, and it is due back, signed by the contract counterparty with the delivery term start date selected by the due date, otherwise the bid will be disqualified. Performance assurance is also due at the same time as a partially executed contract. The amount of performance assurance required will be listed in section 9.1 of the cover sheet, and if performance assurance is not received by the due date, the contract automatically terminates. As a reminder, performance assurance is not required if the project is in service at the time of bid submission. The amount of performance assurance required varies based on the category, medium or large ZREC and LREC, and the project size. Medium ZREC performance assurance is 10% of the first year's revenue. Large ZREC and LREC performance assurance is 20% of the first year's revenue. Example 1 is for a 175 kW medium ZREC solar project, which will produce 273 REC per year. Excuse me, at a bid price of $80 per REC, which results in a performance assurance requirement of $2,184. Example 2 is for a 600 kW large ZREC project, which produces 933 REC per year and a bid price of $65 per REC, which results in a performance assurance requirement of $12,129. And the third example is for a 1 megawatt fuel cell project, which produces 8,279 RECs per year at a bid price of $40 per REC, and the performance assurance requirement would be $66,232. Again, those are all calculated during the bid process. Both companies have posted detailed instructions for how to successfully provide performance assurance on their respective websites. Acceptable forms of performance assurance are cash in the form of an ACH or wire. Please note that ACH payments take longer to process than wire transfers, and please plan accordingly to ensure that the company receives the payment on or before the due date. Bank checks or cashier's checks are also acceptable. However, we will stress that personal and business checks are not accepted under any circumstances.
I would like to also add, please make sure that you include in a memo, if you're sending checks, the number of the project. So if it's LREC, it will start with LL and a number, or make a note of location, but please make sure that you indicate the project of which it belongs to. We have many projects that are coming in, performance assurances, and we want to make sure that we assign it to the correct one. Also, please make sure that you follow the instructions and make it to attention to the department so it doesn't go to a billing or any other department within the company.
This is Aaron Devosky. I would also like to add, just please confirm the amount of the performance assurance that you're sending before you send it. Surprisingly enough, we do get checks and wires that are the incorrect amount for the performance assurance, either over providing the amount or under providing. So just please check before you do send a payment.
Yes, and if you're sending wires, please make sure that you instruct your bank to include the project number in the wire so that our accounting department can verify or they know where to apply that payment. Be sure that you're following all of our instructions and sending them to the correct bank accounts. The bank account information is listed on the contract itself for both companies.
As is the amount of performance.
Yes.
Just as a reminder, we showed you some examples. You're not going to be required to figure out that performance assurance amount. It's calculated, it's provided to you as an example in the application. It's also provided specifically on the contract cover page on the back, the last page of the contract will list the amount of performance assurance that's required down to the penny. And so it should be clear, but if it's not clear and you've been awarded a contract and you're not sure, please contact us.
Okay, I'm going to go quickly through some questions that we've received. One of the questions is there a hard copy of the online bid application available to organize and verify the data prior to filling out the information online? There is not, but I will say that there is a document called the Summary of Required Bidding Information, which goes through every single step of the bid process and outlines all of the information that you will need to type into the online bid form. But you can also go through the online bid form and get up to the end and just not click submit. So you can go through it and see what, how the application looks, what information is required, and then you can go back through and just clear it out, or start a whole new one if you want to. But I do encourage you to look through the Summary of Required Bidding Information form that's available on our website. You can look through that, and that gives you all the information that you'll need. It lists all the documents, etc.
Right, because the application itself asks you some leading questions, and based on your answers, you'll get different drop-down menus, and so it's difficult to provide one standard application online to look through, which is the resulting document that Laura mentioned. And so that's been our decision to work through. Otherwise, we'd have too many versions of a sample application because there's questions that lead you down different paths.
Another question we received is regarding the instruction page on the bid certification form. No, you do not need to submit the instruction page to us. I apologize because that is sort of unclear in the presentation. But no, the instruction page is not required. Only the 3 signature pages are. But I would rather have you submit all 4 pages than leave off one of the important ones. So you can submit all 4, but only the 3 that have the signatures on them are absolutely required during the bid process. Let's see. I think that's about it for right now. We're gonna take a look at some other questions and go and, gather some information. But we also I just want to encourage everyone to submit your bids as soon as you can, as soon as practical, because with the new interconnection requirement, we understand that it might take you a little longer to gather your bids and to complete that requirement. So I strongly encourage you to start working on them as soon as possible so you can get them in before the deadline. The deadline for bid submission is, the bid window will be open for 4 weeks. I just want to get you guys the actual date so we can.
The deadline for submission of questions is August 28, 2018. The bid forms are due on September 7, 2018 by 1 p.m. Eastern Time, at which time pricing shall become firm, irrevocable, and binding.
Thank you. So please be aware of that deadline because bids are not allowed to be submitted after the 1 p.m. deadline. All right, now I will turn it over to Aaron, and he will discuss the post-execution obligation.
Thanks, Laura. So at this point in the process, you have an executed contract. You've sent your executed contract back to the utility on time, along with your performance assurance, if it was required for your project. There's other steps in the process that you have to complete in order for the utility to start paying you for RECs that you generate. So one of the first things that you probably want to do is complete and sign the certification statement for REC delivery acceptance. That also includes a checklist of items that you're going to need on the bottom of the page. So it's helpful to get that done and see what you're going to have to complete. Obviously, you have to, and as most people probably know at this point, you have to have your project in service no later than 1 year after your pre-selected delivery term start date. You can have up to 18 months, or in this new case, 24 months, if you request and receive either 1 or 2 extensions. You'll have to have an interconnection agreement, which you will obtain from your respective distributed resources groups at each utility. You'll have to apply for and obtain Class 1 approval for your project from the regulators at PURA. You'll have to complete some steps within NEPOOL GIS, including registering your generator and setting up a forward certificate transfer and ensuring that the utility is a third-party meter reader of record. You'll also need to have a dedicated REC meter installed, but that process will be discussed in a little bit more detail by James Terkanowitz later on in the presentation. So this slide talks about the 6-month extension to the automatic termination provision request, which has now actually been updated to include 24 months. So basically, if you're up against the 12-month automatic termination date, which again is 1 year after your pre-selected delivery term start date, you do have the option to request a 6-month extension to your automatic termination provision. That allows you up to 18 months beyond your delivery term start date for the project to achieve commercial operation. Again, as Laura pointed out early in the presentation, this has been updated to include an additional 6-month extension to the 18 months, putting you at 24 months. So again, if you're up against your 18-month automatic termination date, you need to send us the extension request and post additional performance assurance before you terminate, or before the termination date, or the extension will not be accepted. From an Eversource perspective, we have an extension request template that's available on the webpage. It's in our resources and administration portion of our website. You can see it also, it's a link in the slide in the presentation. Katerina, I'm not sure how you guys at UI go about your extension request. Do you have a form, or do you just want an email?
No, we just request an email and just stating that you are requesting extension, and we don't send any official form back or letter back that once the extension was awarded, we will just let you know via email again that extension has been awarded, and we will require the performance assurance.
Okay, great. Similar process for Eversource. We'll email you back and let you know that everything has been completed and that your new termination date will be included in the email. So this slide is just some guidance on when you need to request your 6-month extension. So you can see some delivery term start dates up there, and 1 year after those delivery term start dates is your automatic termination date. And on the furthermost right column, you can see the date by which you will have to receive your performance assurance and extension request in order to grant you that extension. It's always 1 day before the termination date, but we encourage you to submit the extension earlier if you do know that you're going to need it. It's much easier for us and for the customer if you get it done ahead of time. So this slide is similar. This is just the second 6-month extension guidance. Puts you at 24 months beyond your delivery term start date. So you can see delivery term start dates, and then 18 months after those delivery term start dates, assuming you had one 6-month extension already. The dates on the right-hand column are the dates that you would have to receive your extension request and performance assurance by in order to give you your last and final 6-month extension, which puts you at 24 months beyond your delivery term start date. And just as a reminder, your contract, your 15-year term does start on your delivery term start date regardless of these extensions. So if you do end up 24 months beyond your delivery term start date, you have lost 2 years of contract value, just as a reminder. So this slide talks a little bit more about the Class 1 qualification I had mentioned earlier. You have to obtain that qualification from PURA, and it's in section 5.1.5 of the terms and conditions. It basically states that it's the seller's responsibility to obtain that Class 1 qualification. Now, if you're an individual customer completing this process, it's either your responsibility or it might be, if you're working with a developer, they might submit that qualification for you. That would have to be worked out between the customer and your developer. So PURA does require you to submit a separate application to them on their website. It's not the application that you submitted to utility for the LREC ZREC program. There's a link in the slide that you can follow to get to their website, and they have some instructions on how to submit the application. PURA does review that Class 1 application, and upon approval, they'll grant you the Connecticut Class 1 qualification. When you submit the application to PURA, they require you to submit to them your final approval to energize document from the utility company. So make sure that you have that before you begin this process. So after you receive your final decision, you have to send that to the buyer listed on your service agreement or contract in this case, which is the utility company. And you also have to submit a copy of that to NEPOOL GIS, where they will take that decision and designate the respective utility company as third-party meter reader of record. Just one thing I'd like to point out, that we will accept a copy of your PURA application and a submission receipt from their website in case that you're up against the termination date. We'll accept that as a placeholder in place of your final decision, as we do understand that PURA can take 1 to 2 months to render these final decisions, so we don't want to terminate your contract based on the fact that you don't have the final decision. So we will accept the application and proof that you submitted it via the confirmation receipt to satisfy that requirement in the interim. So this slide is some more information about the NEPOOL GIS requirement I had mentioned earlier. So each project has to register with NEPOOL GIS as a generator. After registering and after you send NEPOOL your PURA decision, NEPOOL will then select the proper buyer or the utility company as the third-party meter reader of record for the project. You also have to set up a forward certificate transfer for the life of the contract. And what that essentially does is automatically transfer the RECs that the utility company uploads for you. The RECs are then deposited into the customer's account, and then via that forward certificate transfer, they're automatically sent to the utility or buyer's account for purchase. Any rules and instructions for this process can be found on the NEPOOL website, and there's a link in this slide. From an Eversource perspective, we also provide some instructions on how to do this when we send emails about your REC delivery acceptance process, so that's another resource you can use. So this slide is really just a quick warning about what the consequences are if you don't complete the steps that I had just mentioned. So you could experience a loss of revenue on the contract. As I mentioned before, the life of the contract is 15 years, and that's firm, and that starts on the delivery term start date, whether or not you completed the aforementioned requirements. So you begin to lose contract value as soon as that delivery term start date is reached and you're not generating and being paid for RECs. Also, the contract might eventually reach termination if you don't complete the necessary requirements and provide them to the buyer, the utility company, by the automatic termination date, which again is 1 year after the delivery term start date, or 6 to 12 months, or 18 months to 24 months, I should say, after the delivery term start date if you obtain the possible extensions. And ultimately, termination of the contract does result in the sacrifice of all your performance assurance that you may have posted. If you posted 1, 2, or even 3 sets of performance assurance and your contract terminates, you're going to sacrifice all of it in that case. So after you complete and submit all the previously mentioned requirements to the company, you get an acknowledgement letter, and that includes what we call a REC delivery acceptance date. And that letter essentially verifies that you have completed all the requirements that you need to, and that the utility will start to begin purchasing RECs from that REC delivery acceptance date, which will be very clear in the letter. It'll tell you an exact date that we'll start accepting your generation from. It's important to note that if you haven't received this letter, it does mean you still have outstanding items for completion, and you won't be given any payments for your RECs. So if you're wondering, if you email us or call us and you're wondering why you haven't been paid and you don't have that letter, it does mean that there's still things that you need to provide to the utility in order to get going. So here's some additional information on how we administer the contract. Again, this is a bit redundant, but I'll say it again, the contract does last 15 years and it starts promptly on your delivery term start date, which was pre-selected by the seller during contract execution. Additionally, the payment rate that you have obtained for REC, it remains static the entire 15-year term, so it will not change. It won't go up. It won't go down. It's the same throughout the 15-year term. And based on the previously mentioned REC delivery acceptance date, the buyer, the utility company, will upload REC meter data to NEPOOL. And we do that on a quarterly basis. And once that meter data is uploaded to NEPOOL, RECs are automatically created by NEPOOL system and deposited into the seller's account, where, as I mentioned, that previously established forward certificate transfer automatically sends them to the buyer's account, where they'll verify the number and initiate payment following. Payment for RECs usually occurs by the end of the following month after REC creation. So if we upload if we upload in July, on July 10th, and RECs are created on July 15th, payment should be initiated by the end of the following month, which would be August. So here's just a quick little visual about the process I previously described. If you move from left to right, you see the utility reads the meter and uploads the RECs, or uploads the meter data to NEPOOL. RECs are created and put in the seller's account, where that forward certificate transfer sends them to the utility or buyer's account. Then the utility verifies, settles, and initiates payments to the seller. This is just a quick chart about the timeline of upload and payment. So as I mentioned before, if we upload on July 10th, which is the deadline for uploading quarter 1 data. RECs are created 5 days after the upload deadline, which is July 15th, and payments initiated by the end of the following month. And you can just take a look at the chart and gather the information for the rest of the quarters, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So here are some other contract revisions that I'd like to mention quickly. First is that any contract can be assigned in accordance with Article 11 of the Terms and Conditions throughout any point in the life of the 15-year term of the contract. Any related documentation or forms that are required for those assignments can be found on each company's website. We do ask that you visit the website to use the new forms found. They sometimes can change. And from an Eversource perspective, we have a manager that has a new last name, so we'd prefer you to use the new forms so that we could use the proper name. Once the assignment documentation is submitted, the buyer or the utility company has 30 days to review and approve or reject the assignment. Another thing I'd like to mention, not related to assignments, is the option to bank RECs when you exceed your maximum annual quantity. So the maximum annual quantity, as I believe was previously mentioned, is the maximum amount of RECs that the utility company will pay you for in any one contract year. So if that number is exceeded by your generation, you have the option to have the utility company bank those RECs towards the next contract year's MAQ. The RECs will be banked and they'll be removed from the next year's MAQ, and you'll be paid for them in the respective quarter that they come off of. So if you overproduce RECs by more than one quarter, we could actually push them out as many quarters as necessary if you choose to pursue that option. You could also attempt to have us return the RECs to you in your NEPOOL account and attempt to work with an aggregator or a third party and have them sold on your own behalf. The utility companies will not help you in that process, so that would be completely up to you to handle it. That's the route you chose to go.
When we say we won't help you, we mean we can't take on the obligation to sell your renewable energy credits. We will help you to get the RECs back to you to where they need to go, but we can't take on the obligation to sell any renewable energy credits that are not technically ours to sell.
Right. Katarina has something to add?
Yes, I just wanted to add for other contract provisions, please, if during the project and during the contract, if any contact information change, please let us know. We have instances that we were basically circling in the emails because the emails were getting back to us and we were unable to contact people. So please make sure that if any contact updates, to let us know so we can update our information. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll echo that point, Katarina. It's a good point. We have the same issue at Eversource. A lot of times we find out that someone has left the company or has been terminated or whatever it might be, well on down the road, and find out that they hadn't been getting our notices, something that required action. So it's just better to be proactive and let us know if a contact has changed ahead of time, please.
Just to quickly go over some of the questions that we've received, and again, I'm going to echo that if you have questions, please submit them to lrec.zrec@eversource.com. Do not submit them through the WebEx. We will not be able to receive any questions that are submitted through the GoToWebinar presentation tool. So please, if you have questions, please submit them directly to lrec.zrec@eversource.com, and that's listed in the bottom left-hand corner of every one of the slides, as you can see on the screen. One of the questions that we received is a new utility service request, does that constitute new construction? And the answer is yes. If there's not a permanent revenue meter at the location, that is considered a new construction project. So yes, that a new utility service request would be required to submit an application to the interconnection group first before submitting a bid to us. And another question was, if you do not submit an application by the due date of September 7th, when will the year 8 LREC process occur? And I'm going to defer to Christy for an answer on that one.
Thanks, Laura. Public Act 1850 includes language regarding a year 8 LREC ZREC procurement. Public Utility Regulatory Authority has opened an initial exploratory docket as to the implementation of Public Act 1850 and the ultimate successor program to the LREC ZREC program. We're under development of that program right today. I would say that it is unclear as to the schedule of the year 8 LREC ZREC program based upon the outcome of the implementation of Section 7 under Public Act 1850. And so therefore, we can't fully provide a schedule at this time.
And also to that, just an addition, I guess, to that question is there was a question that we received regarding if the project is awarded an LREC ZREC contract but is not built before the upcoming tariff program begins, will net metering be preserved for said ZREC project? And the answer to that is that we don't have an answer, unfortunately, at this time. It's still being worked out with PURA. Under Public Act 1850, we encourage you to follow that Public Act, to participate in the docket, to make sure that you're receiving any updates or notifications regarding that docket, because it will ultimately affect you and your project in the future. So we don't have an answer to that specifically right now.
We will commit, though, however, if there is clarification provided by the Public Utility Regulatory Authority on those matters, we'll provide that information to our distribution list, because we understand those are significant and worthwhile questions. The utilities are unable, though, at this time to provide clarity on that topic based upon the fact that we're waiting for clarification from PURA on the issue.
Laura, any more questions?
That's all we have right now.
Okay, I'll continue and wrap up with my piece here. So this slide talks about the Eversource REC meter reads portal. It's something that you can log on to the eversource.com website and view the REC meter reads by month for your project or projects if you're a developer and are associated with more than one. It's a pretty simple process. We have a one-page form to fill out and send back to the utility. You just simply need to provide the seller, the project name, and your user ID. That needs to be, I'll stress that it needs to be registered on the eversource.com webpage. We've had some user IDs that were provided that were not registered, and people were kind of questioning why they couldn't view their meter reads. Well, that's the first piece in the process. You can either use an existing user ID that you have. Maybe you pay your bill on eversource.com. You can use that if you'd like. You could also register a brand new one and just kind of devote it to this if that's the route you choose to go. But you do need to have a registered Eversource.com user ID and password in order to be able to complete this process. You can find the one-page form on our resources and administration portion of our website. It's there, and you just simply fill it out and email it to Eversource or to LREC.ZREC@eversource.com. We'll process that and send you an acknowledgement email when that's complete. It may take a few months to complete. Sometimes customers have sent forms with meters that are relatively new. So in the process, we require some things to be completed before we can get the meter posted on the website. Some things like NEPOOL unit ID, and again, the meter read schedule is a few months behind schedule, behind current time. So things aren't done on a calendar basis. So if you send me a meter read form request for a brand new meter, you may not see the request form. You may not see the acknowledgement email for a month or two until things kind of shake themselves out and the meter is read on a regular schedule and things of that nature. I believe right now reads are current up through June on the Eversource website for anyone that is a part of the program. This is what the Eversource REC meter reads website looks like. You can just see an example. It says test project 1. There's a drop-down arrow that you would just click there, and it would expand for monthly reads and by year. So if you've been a part of the LREC ZREC program for more than 1 year, you'll see the reads by year, starting when you were a part of the program. If you do have more than one project, you'll see all the project names listed with drop-down arrows next to them. And if you're a developer, you might have multiple projects to view or manage, so you can kind of see them here. And we can associate as many projects as you'd like with a single user ID, as long as you're associated with that project. So we won't grant you access to the meter reads if you're not associated with the project in any way. You need to be associated with the seller or the counterparty on the contract in order for us to grant you access to to the meter reads or get permission from seller or counterparty on the contract for us to grant you the ability to view those meter reads. So here's just some other quick administrative information. If you have any questions or you want to be added to the company's distribution list, we both have them. We send out updates to all of our customers on the distribution list on occasion. So Eversource is LREC.ZREC@eversource.com and UI's is LREC.ZREC@uinet.com. You can also visit the company's respective websites for information about the program. You can see the links on the slide. There's a lot of useful information on those web pages, and we encourage you to visit those pages and kind of take everything in before you ask questions about the program. Not that we won't answer them, but there's just a lot of information that you can gather by taking a look there first, and then if you come to us with specific questions, it's easier for both parties. So here is a screenshot of Eversource's Renewable Energy Credit website. There's a couple of arrows just pointing out some things for you. It references the year 5 RFP, but the setup is the same. So you would just click on the bottom of that page to submit an LREC ZREC bid. You can also see an arrow to the LREC large and medium ZRECs over on the left. That actually takes you to the web page that you're seeing over on the right. And also an arrow pointing to Resources Administration, which contains a lot of the forms that we had mentioned from before, including the extension request form, the meter read form, assignment documentation, certification statement, all sorts of things are there. So it's a very resourceful page, no pun intended, for the program. And lastly, here's a quick look at UI's website. Katerina, I don't know if you want to describe anything here, but it just points to links that contain some useful information from UI's programmatic perspective.
Exactly, and feel free to, explore into each of the links. There is all kinds of resourceful information in there, including how to proceed and how to bid and all of that information, so please feel free to do so. I just wanted to add again, please make sure during this webinar that you direct the questions to lrec.zrec@eversource.com. Please do not direct it to individual emails, so you can answer as soon as possible.
And on that note, a few more questions that we've received. The docket number for we'll call it the LREC Acceptor Program, I guess, is 18-5050. So just to clarify that. And again, for the new construction requirement, you must submit your interconnection application, and payment for that interconnection application must be received by the utility, and you will receive a confirmation letter from our distributed resources group that states that the interconnection application has been received and your payment has been received. So you don't have to it doesn't have to be approved by interconnection. It just has to be submitted and paid for. And again, you'll receive a confirmation receipt from our distributed resources group that states that.
Laura, I just wanted to clarify, I think someone asked what the docket number is, with Public Utility Regulatory Authority. So the Public Act is 1850.
Oh, okay.
But the docket, if you go to the Connecticut Public Utility Regulatory Authority, you can search by docket, and they've opened docket number 180615. 180615. 18-06-15. That's the way they're listed on PURA docket. If you're looking for anything, you need the dashes.
Yes, thank you for that. And there was a question regarding how long does it typically take to process an interconnection application from application to approval, and James will discuss that now, actually, so I'll pass it over to him.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So, generator interconnection process. I'm James Serkanowicz with the Eversource Distributed Generation Group. So the interconnection process hasn't changed really at all recently. I'll just briefly hit up for Eversource just the slight differences on the interface. This won't be anything that will be different on the slides that we're going to go through, but I'll just handle that verbally. So going on to the next page, it's been a collaborative effort over the last 10 years, obviously, to make this process as smooth and as friendly as possible on the customer and the contractor. We do follow the same guidelines for interconnection, both at Eversource and UI. Internally, procedures may be a little bit different as far as how those guidelines are interpreted, or internally as far as whether or not the things are processed on a more manual basis or a more automatic basis, and how much is done as far as manual paper versus electronic. So those are the differences internally on how they'll be processed between UI and Eversource, but they are the same guidelines and they are approved by the regulatory authority. So we do follow those obviously as strictly as possible, and we're available to interpretation. You might get some slightly different interpretations in the two companies, but it is still the same guidelines and is still based on the FERC procedures. So what are the purposes of the guidelines? Obviously, we want to safely and reliably interconnect your generation to the grid, make sure that it does not have any adverse impact on the distribution system. And if we do determine through the review process that it could have a potential impact, we would identify any upgrades to the grid that would be required and what the relative costs would be of those. And at that point, a customer decision could be made on whether or not to proceed with the project based on what those upgrades would cost, or options such as downsizing or withdrawing are obviously always available to the customer in the contract. So what are the three tracks that these can go down? There is the simplified process, as we're calling it. That was the most recent revision to the guidelines, but it's been in effect, I think, for upwards of a year and a half at this point, so hopefully everybody's now settled into it comfortably. And that is that for residential projects that utilize single-phase certified inverters that are 20 kW or less, and that aggregate size is based on the AC output of the inverters, those would go through the simplified process. And again, that must meet those three criteria. So if a project is under 20 kW, but is a commercial project, or is a three-phase project, or is using a non-certified inverter, that automatically kicks it up to the next process, which is the fast-track process. So anything that doesn't fit into the simplified process goes to the fast-track. So it is residential projects over 20, it is all three-phase projects, it is all commercial projects, and that fast-track process is for projects that go up to 2 megawatts. After you exceed the 2 megawatt threshold, that's when it goes directly to the study process. The study process, again, handles projects that are over 2 megawatts, and it also is the process that is followed when a project that went through the fast track fails that process and needs to have additional studies conducted. One recent change that you'll see, at least on the Eversource website, is now that we've gone to our new Power Clerk system, where previously you would have two different online applications that you would click on to fill out, one for the 20 or less process and one for the fast track and study process. When you go into eversource.com and click on the link and log into Power Clerk, you have one single online application form, and based on how you filled it out, based on your responses to the information such as the customer's billing account, meter number, whether or not the project, again, based on size or phase, it will automatically then direct those projects down the respective tracks of simplified, fast track, or still. So that is a recent change, again, by the implementation of the Power Clerk system for Eversource.
Yeah, so just to say that again, because I think the folks hopefully have heard that in the past, you would have had to pick the correct application for the size of your project. And now, with the Power Clerk application system, based on the questions that you answer, it's one single application, and it will direct you to the right category.
That is correct, Christy. My apologies. I did want to, in hindsight, I probably should have created a couple of screen captures of the new Power Clerk interfaces, so that could be part of the slide process. But hopefully by now, the majority of contractors that are listening in on this webinar have set up their login to Power Clerk and have starting to become more familiar with the process. Yes, the key change there is you just have one little form to click on, or one application form that directs you down, where previously there were different links depending on the process. And hopefully you're finding it, I think we've received overall positive feedback on the Power Clerk system, that it does help, hopefully intuitively, run you through submitting an application, and we really feel that the increased capability of interfacing with our billing system is helping reduce errors on applications. So when you do put in a billing account number and a meter number and a zip code, those are the first requirements when you're interconnecting behind an existing meter. If you do get an error, please don't assume that the error is on our part. 99.9% of the time, the error is that you may be using an old billing account number, you may be using an old meter number, or you may be putting in the wrong zip code. When you're connecting behind an existing meter, we are asking for the billing address zip code, not the site zip code. That's a key distinction, so that obviously if a bill is being sent to somewhere different than the actual site, you're going to have a different zip code. And so if you do get an error, again, please make sure you're double checking and site verifying meter numbers, because if you're going off a bill that is a year old, there's a pretty good chance that the meter could have been changed out through a formal retirement process, through a rate change, any number of reasons. So please make sure that you are getting a recent copy of the bill, as recent as possible before you actually go to submit, and that you are field verifying meter numbers. If you are doing an application that is brand new construction, you're not interconnecting behind an existing meter, but it is a service that has not yet been established, so consider it new construction. There is the option of the 3 different options in Power Clerk of selecting new application, no existing Eversource account. And in those instances, obviously, you don't have a billing account or a meter number to enter. So in those cases, it is more of a free-form situation where you're putting in the name of the customer, you're putting in the site address, instead of it being pulled in automatically from our billing system. So please, when you do that, please make sure that the application is being submitted in the name of who will be the customer record. Because you don't have an account yet, there may be a tendency to put in the application name of some LLC or third party that might own the project, but we always consider projects based on who the Eversource customer record will be, assuming UI follows that same procedure, so that when the account is established, the interconnection agreement and all application forms are in the same name of that same entity that will be paying the Eversource bill, that will be getting the benefit of that net metering for the generation. So again, my apologies that I don't have a slide on that new interface for Power Clerk, but maybe I'll try to get that for the next one of these. So again, moving on to the next slide, the simplified process is a $200 application fee. There's no longer a need to submit insurance. There is no longer an interconnection agreement that is required, and this is strictly for residential 20 or less single-phase inverter based. With the new Power Clerk system as well, we now have the ability for you to pay online the application fees, where previously everything had to be manual check. So when you run through that Power Clerk process, you get to the end, you will see that you can make an online payment with a credit card. Just please make sure that you follow through. It redirects you to Western Union, where you make the credit card payment on that. So sometimes we've seen people that have submitted the application to Power Clerk and not fall through with going to Western Union, and then are wondering why their application is moving forward. It's because we haven't seen the fee yet.
James, if I might ask you, what's the definition of residential from a DG perspective? Is it a rate thing, or how do you guys define residential?
Sure. So it is based on a rate thing. So that is where Power Clerk helps us make sure it goes down the right track. Once you enter in the billing count and the meter number and zip code and hit that button to retrieve the customer information, it should automatically be based on the rate classification, specifying that whether or not this is a residential or a commercial project.
Okay. And the reason why I mentioned that is just for the LREC ZREC program perspective, is that residential projects aren't eligible unless they're denied by the Green Bank based on not being a residential dwelling. So James is talking about residential projects. There is a chance that it could be eligible, and it's based on rate class from an LREC ZREC perspective, just like James said for his process. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not a guarantee that you would be eligible if you're a residential rate code.
And I have also seen, by the way, in 1 or 2 instances where a contractor has put in the information and hit the query button to retrieve it from our customer billing system and said, gee, I think that's wrong, and then gone and manually edited the fields. I hate to tell people that I almost don't want people to know that they can do this, but unfortunately they must know that it can be done. Please don't do that. If it's retrieved the information from the customer billing system and it says the name of this customer is X, don't then go manually and say, no, that must be wrong. It's right. It's querying on a daily basis what is the latest information. So if you see it retrieve a customer name and that's not what you want the application to be in, stop. Don't proceed with the application. If the customer, if there's a desire to have the account be in a different name, the application and the interconnection be a different name, the customer must first contact our billing system, must contact our customer service, and have the name changed on the account to whoever it is that they think should be on the account. All right. This is particularly important, obviously, as well when you've got, for instance, obviously the space is being leased, and often developers will think that the application needs to be in the name of the person that's owning the system or in the name of the landlord. However, that is not the case. The interconnection is always based on the Eversource customer record. So if the bill is in the name of the tenant, that's the name on the interconnection application. That's the name that's going on the interconnection agreement. If there's a desire for that not to be the case, then you would have to go to our billing, to our customer service group, and change the name of the account to whoever it is you want that interconnection to be the name of. So moving on, so again, the simplified process someone's asking for about timeline. Please understand that when you look at this next slide, it's based on receipt of proper information. So within 3 days of receiving that application, we are attempting to get back to everyone and tell them that we received the application. And then within that, we have 10 business days to see if that application is indeed complete, has all the required materials, so that we can then move it ahead to what we would consider the technical review process. So now we are at a point for Eversource where applications submitted via Power Clerk. We will give it a couple days to see if the check has come in for the Western Union payment has been processed, and then we will evaluate and look at those interconnection applications that were submitted to begin that completeness review. Previously, we were strictly waiting across the board for that payment to come in before we even looked at applications. We are now thankfully at a position where we have staffing and we have the ability to look at an application, and even if the payment hasn't come in, if it's been submitted and the submitted status for, I'd say about, a couple of days, we can look and see, all right, if the Western Union payment was processed or not, or if the manual check has come in and been received and processed by us. At that point, we can begin that completeness review. So when you talk about timelines, again, it's all subject to receiving complete application materials and being able to move it, and that's, again, that 10 business day window. If it is, moving it into the technical review process, and that is a 15 business day process, up to 15 business days. The advantage of the Power Clerk system for us is that the technical review process is much more automated. We now utilize our GIS database to query technical information such as transformer sizes, number of customers interconnected beyond that transformer, existing generation that is interconnected. So you're probably seeing for your 20 or less residential projects a fairly quick turnaround time between determination that a application is complete for review and then determining if it has passed the technical review process. We are typically issuing a contingent approval email, sometimes the very same day that we begin that review process, or at least determining if it has failed the screen and requires further review and things such as upgrades or perhaps adjustments to the inverter. We're starting to become also a little more open-minded on finding smart inverter-based solutions where if a project fails because of things such as secondary voltage rise, rather than instantly saying you have to upgrade a transformer or upgrade wire sizes, things of that nature, if there are smart solutions that can be implemented such as inverter settings. That is all on a case-by-case basis, though, so please don't assume anything. Let us do the review first, and if we determine it fails, we will communicate possible remedies to the failure of that technical review process. Again, if all goes well, you'll issue the contingent approval. The ball is now on the customer and the contractor to get the system built, get the town to inspect and approve the system, and once we get the town inspection approval, for the majority of residential projects, it's simply making the net meter change within those next 10 business days, and once that's completed, we will then send that approval to Energize. If we do determine that a witness test is required, we'll communicate that as well. For Eversource, again, we are typically waiving that witness test requirement for our residential 20 or less projects, and the exception to that being if it's complicated, if there is some sort of unique battery install that we feel does need a testing, or if this is a new installer, we do require 3 witness tests, and once you've had 3 successful witness tests, we will then typically waive that requirement. And again, once we get through that, town inspection approval will signal that we can come out and change the meter. We can please allow up to 10 business days for that to happen, but obviously we strive for being a much shorter time frame than that. But we do automatically get those town inspection approvals reported to us when the inspector goes online and submits it using the work request number or CRS number assigned to the project. So if a customer or contractor is wondering why we haven't come out and done a net meter change, please don't assume that it's an Eversource issue. Please go online and check using the link that we give you in those contingent approval letters, and you can often see that while you may have had a town inspection conducted, the town inspector may have failed to follow up and submit that inspection approval. That's typically the reason for the delay in the net meter change, and we do give you the ability to go online and check that for yourself. So please utilize that before instantly emailing or calling the DG group and asking why the meter wasn't changed. Again, once that completes, approval to energize is granted, and you get to go on your merry way. Next, slide is basically just the overall fast track study process map. So obviously, this shows that what the normal path will be if things, proceed and pass the technical screening process versus what would be necessary if things fail and have to go to additional studies. What kind of traffic goes down. Won't spend a lot of time on this slide. It's same one that you've probably been seeing every time. But again, please just don't make an assumption anytime you submit a fast track that it's going to pass. Please build in that time and don't come in with an expectation that instantly at 5, 10, 15 days after submission of the application that you're going to get your contingent approval. We certainly hope that's the case, but please be prepared for the possibility that it could fail this fast track process and require further study. We have vastly reduced the number of projects that end up going to a full impact study by implementing many other supplemental review procedures that have enabled more interconnections to pass the fast track process than might previously have occurred. So on the next slide, the fast track process again is anything up to 2 megawatts, anything that didn't fall into the simplified process has the increased $500 application fee. Witness test is going to be on a case-by-case basis. Typically, again, for contractors that have already had their 3 required tests, in the case of Eversource, we are typically allowing self-certification. Essentially, you're agreeing to do a self-test of the system, filling out what we call a certificate of compliance, saying you did the test and passed, signing your name to it, and sending this back to us. That is typically for projects at this point in time that are 100 kW or less. Projects over 100 kW in aggregate size are still required to have a paid witness test with Eversource. And again, that cost is on a case-by-case basis for projects. And you are still required to submit liability coverage. That is, again, for the customer of record, not for the developer, not for the third-party ownership. There's a customer record that must prove that they have the required liability coverage.
Just quickly, James, if you could, again, reiterate what the difference is between the simplified and the fast track, or what the differentiating factors are. You had a question regarding that.
Sure. So again, simplified is a strict 20 or less kW, and again, that's based on the AC output of the inverters. It must be a residential project. It must be single phase, and you must be utilizing certified inverters. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be a PV project. I've seen wind projects that have been submitted that are 20 kW or less, and because they are utilizing a UL 1741 SA certified inverter, they fall into that category. But once you come out of that, fall outside of that narrow category, you must go through the fast track process. So even if you're under 20, if it's 3-phase, if it's commercial, if it's a non-certified, you kick into the fast track process. And that fast track process, again, applies to all those projects that don't fit into the simplified category and are up to 2 megawatts in size.
And the residential, the definition of residential is based on Eversource and not based on the Connecticut Green Bank, and only in turn when it comes to the interconnection process. That
is correct. Yeah, if the use of the property could be residential in nature, but if the account itself is established as a commercial, industrial, anything that is a non-residential category of rate class, then that is considered to be non-residential, is considered to be commercial. Otherwise, that would make it a fast track process.
Thank you. Sorry, there's another question.
Sure.
Is there a fee associated with using a credit card to pay for the interconnection application fee?
There was not. My boss probably doesn't want to let you know this, but there is a fee, but we are actually absorbing that cost. So we're treating you guys to paying that on your behalf.
You're welcome.
So, yeah. So, yes, we do realize, I'm not sure what the fees that Western Union charges us for those, but we are absorbing that cost because we do certainly appreciate the online payments as we can obviously, it's less manual check processing, obviously requires more labor on our part. When you pay online, we get a Western Union report every single morning that tells us all the payments that were made the previous day. And maybe I'll jump on a question here that's probably going to be the next question we're getting a lot is, can you make other payments online using Western Union? At this time, no. It is strictly the application fees of $200, $500, and $1,000. That is the only that is the only online payment that can be done at this point in time. Perhaps in the future, we would certainly love if other payments such as for REC meters or for witness tests or grid improvement work could be online payments, but at this point in time, you only have the option when you're directed to Western Union to pay one of those $3 amounts, 200, 500, or 1,000. So please also pay attention. We have certainly seen a couple errors at times where someone will submit a fast track application, so that would be a $500 fee. Then they go to Western Union and they pay $200. So then when we process the payment, we see that you're $300 short. The only way to remedy that is for you to send us a check for $300. There's no option to go online and do a $300 payment. So please pay attention when you're redirected to Western Union, because that's something that's slightly out of our control, is making sure that you are indeed paying the correct amount out of those three possible dollar amounts. So again, if you meet all the screen requirements, we'll run you through the fast track process, and we'll determine if there's any additional studies that are needed. If projects are greater than 1 megawatt, it does require ISO New England notification. That is a form that we will assist you in filling out. Typically, we will download that form, fill out as much information as we can on your behalf, and then you may see some questions from your project manager of additional information that needs to be filled out. And our department, our transmission group, does assist us in submitting those forms to ISO for approval. And again, we will issue an interconnection agreement that will need to be executed by the customer of record, not by the developer, not by the owner of the system, but by the Eversource or UI customer of record on the billing account. So again, that approval process, similar to the 20 or less simplified process, similar time frames where we are receiving the application, letting you know we got it, checking it for completeness. If it's fine, moving it ahead to a technical review, and that is a 15 business day process. And if it passes those reviews, issuing that interconnection agreement. We also, you'll see from Eversource, issue what's called a contingent approval letter. I can't stress enough, please read that contingent approval thoroughly. I feel that I get a lot of questions from installers that if they simply read the contingent approval letter, their questions are answered and outlined there. Those letters tell you if there are specific requirements to the project, if there are items we identified as needing revision or still owed. We clearly identify costs of witness tests. We even include, for projects that are REC projects, cost of meters, if additional plan revisions are needed to comply with the ZREC requirements. And we give you a schedule of milestones that gives you a time frame where we're working to help you achieve your desired in-service date. That schedule of milestones, please keep in mind, it is based on your desired in-service date. We back into, okay, if you want to be online 2 months from now, then please make sure you get these items back to us, in the weeks prior to that, as prescribed in that schedule. So it's not anything to hang you on; it's something to help you. So please utilize that, and communication with the project manager is always key. If you find that there's something that has changed, we can simply internally work with those dates. It doesn't necessarily require that an entire new schedule of milestones be issued or that any documents be re-executed. Again, it's a guide. It's there to help you, not to hang you. So, but again, once we issue that interconnection agreement, those documents will outline what you have to do: customer signing, returning them, returning payments for witness tests, if applicable, returning test procedures if applicable, or again, if it's under 100, returning a certificate of compliance. As usual, getting town inspection approval and the subsequent meter change. Once all those items are met, then issuing the approval to energize. Again, with the implementation of the Power Clerk system, when items are owed, you should almost always, unless there are little bugs that we're still working out since we're still in our infancy with Power Clerk, but by and large, when you log into PowerClerk, the status that your project is at will give you access to a form where you can upload these materials. So for instance, when it says, when you issue an interconnection agreement in PowerClerk, your project will be in a status called something in effect of Eversource issued agreement, or customer fulfilling milestone requirements. And when you log into PowerClerk, go into that application, look at that form, it gives you the ability to upload the customer signed interconnection agreement. It gives you the ability to upload a test procedure if applicable. It gives you the ability to upload the certificate of compliance if that's the process. You do, unfortunately, still though, in the case of a paid witness test, have to manually send in a witness test fee check that we will process, and as I mentioned, also have to send in a manual check for payment of the ZREC meter. But again, if all of that goes according to how it's supposed to, we will then issue an approval to energize, more commonly now known as the permission to operate, and then once again, you can connect the system. We do give you, obviously, as I said, in the contingent approval letter, some assistance with understanding the ZREC process, but please understand that these are two separate processes. They often happening concurrently, but they are two separate processes. So it is possible to complete the interconnection process, and you may still understandably owe items, and probably will, for completing the ZREC process. Next slide. Projects that are over 2 megawatts, up to 20 megawatts will go through the study process automatically. That is a $1,000 fee. Again, test fees are dependent on the details of the project and the system. Liability insurance, again, is also dependent on the size. There are requirements up to 1 megawatt, and then I think over 2 megawatts. So just follow the guidelines as far as what those require. And then any fast track application that has anything that has failed a fast track application may need an impact study, maybe go through this process as well. And just as with others, this requires an interconnection agreement, and then ice and inland transmission impact studies are required for anything over 5 megawatts. Next slide. Again, these are guidelines, so keep that in mind when you're looking at the track that studies can go down. It's on a project-by-project basis as to whether or not it needs a feasibility study, or whether or not it goes straight to an impact study. If it goes, subsequently to facility studies. These time frames are guidelines, and it states that in the guidelines that the more complicated projects, we do have the right to say that the study will take more than 30 business days. It's also important to note that the clocks that you see here, the 30 business day clocks, are based on having received all required items. So that means that we have not only issued you an impact study agreement with a scope and a price, but you've signed and returned that agreement, you have paid for the study, we've had potentially a kickoff meeting to determine if there are any items owed to us so that we can begin the study. Once all of those items are met, that's when we begin the study and the clock begins. And if at any time during the study we determine there are deficiencies that we're not previously aware of, we can put a hold on that clock and request those owed materials, and the project would stay on hold until we receive those and determine that's sufficient to then resume the clock and complete the study. But again, once studies are completed, the results are issued, and those study results become part of the interconnection agreement. And obviously any costs for construction, whether or not it's grid improvement work or things such as direct transfer trip, would be outlined in the results of those agreements. The costs and whatnot will be communicated, and you would be responsible, obviously, for making payments for that improvement work as prescribed in the results. So what are the keys to a successful interconnection? Obviously, follow the guidelines, make sure the application is complete, make sure it is customer signed, and we do now, again, through PowerClerk, give you the ability to have the customer e-sign the interconnection application. So that certainly is an option that we encourage you to utilize rather than doing manual applications and manual signatures. When you get through the interconnection application in PowerClerk, one of the last things it asks you if you want to have the customer e-sign it, and it gives you the ability to click please send request for e-signature. It is important to note as well in PowerClerk that you have several categories that may not have been in our previous application form. You have customer, you have applicant, you have contractor, you have owner. When we refer to applicant, we are typically referring to the interconnection contractor. So, whether or not you are one of the major, so if you're one of the typical the typical PV contractors that we work with, you should be putting your information and your contact information in the section that is referred to as applicant in the Power Clerk system. You would then, again, be duplicating your information in the contractor section, but once you filled it in as applicant, there's a drop-down that says, basically, same, when it asks you the contract information, you can say same as applicant, and then when you get to the owner section, you can say same as customer, or you could say same as, PV contractor, or if there is a third party that's going to own the system, you can then enter that information. That information is really just at this point, as far as ownership goes, for tracking purposes only. Again, it does not change who the interconnection agreement is with. It is still with the customer of record, regardless of who owns the system. Insurance, obviously, again, is a requirement. Please make sure that when you submit that document, it's either a declaration page or a COI, certificate of insurance, that preferably is in the name of the customer of record, and certainly references the site location as being covered, and clearly shows that the required amount of general liability coverage is carried. $300,000 for projects up to 100 kW, $1 million. I think that's for projects up to either 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts. I don't have that memorized, so my apologies there. But again, just please make sure that not only does it show the general liability coverage amount, but that it also has a valid date. Sending a certificate of insurance or declaration page for something that's already expired on the date you're submitting the application isn't very helpful. So please make sure it's a valid document. Technical data sheets, we're not as strict on that, at least in Eversource, in terms of having to attach that to an online application. If you would like to, that would go in the other attachments category. And we do need to reiterate that inverters now must be not just UL 1741, but UL 1741 SA certified. So that is for the new IEEE ride-through settings. We did originally try to restrict in the Power Clerk application, since you now have the ability to select the inverters, and that's the only way to build out the application, only being able to allow to select inverters that met the new SA requirements. And we had to temporarily suspend that due to some issues we're having. That may get reinstated at some point, but since those guidelines, those new settings requirements have been put into effect essentially industry-wide, it is our expectation that all new projects henceforth should be utilizing new 1741 SA certified inverters that have those new IEEE ride-through setting capabilities. Again, number of inverters and total generation size. The benefit of Power Clerk is, since you're selecting off of the California certified list for both the inverters and panels and whatnot, it should automatically be calculating your system size based on what you're selecting. So that's hopefully eliminating some errors in terms of applications having different sizes than what's actually being instructed. Obviously, please make sure that you're double checking that what you're selecting for inverters matches what's on the one-line diagram you're providing us. Again, the account and the meter number, most current copy of the bill, field verification meter number. That'll help you make sure that when you enter into Power Clerk, it's retrieving the correct information. And again, if you get an error, don't assume the error is ours. Please assume the error is on your end, that you might have some bad or old or incorrect information. And please attempt to remedy it rather than overwriting information with more incorrect information. Again, ownership is not a primary concern of ours, because as far as we're concerned, this is an interconnection with the customer of record. But in some cases, ownership proof might be provided. Other keys to successful, please pay attention to the Exhibit B of the guidelines. Those are the technical requirements for all projects fall in the fast track process. So that's where you'll see certainly requirements such as needing a redundant relay for projects over 1 megawatt, and where you can see more specific technical information such as settings requirements for inverters, and just in general the IEEE and other technical types of standards that must be followed. Another key, obviously, in your one line, please make sure that you're labeling things correctly, that you're identifying clearly the number, model, size of inverters that you're proposing. We're less concerned with panels, but certainly, obviously, those should be shown. And obviously, in terms of dovetailing this with the ZREC process, I did state that interconnection is a separate but parallel process with the ZREC process. And typically, obviously, most of our interconnections that are received tend to already have a ZREC contract award the majority of the time. So you do yourself a favor by making sure that the one line already has the ZREC meter identified clearly, and as well has the kind of requirements that I'll discuss in the next section where I'm covering for meter engineering. Then we'll have the required details for 3-line details of REC metering drawn correctly, as well as identifying the location on the site plan. Again, success, if you want this interconnection to be successful, timely communication of the right data. You're going to receive a contingent approval prior to construction. The disconnect switch is still a requirement. Please make sure that AC disconnect switch is exterior ground level location. There are a few exceptions to that requirement, and you have to request that. Please don't assume, but the limited cases which we will potentially allow an interior disconnect are municipal facilities, such as schools, where we know that tampering of the switch could be a concern. We want compliance with meter and service requirements. So for Eversource, that's our INR manual, previously referred to as our yellow book, but it's no longer yellow. So that meter and service requirements manual will help you avoid certain pitfalls, such as interconnecting within the Eversource metering compartment. That's a big no-no. And that applies whether it's a self-contained meter or whether that's a CT-based meter. You cannot make the interconnection in the Eversource meter socket. No ifs, ands, or buts. Doesn't matter if it's behind the meter. You can't be in that CT compartment or in the meter box. And there are other useful items in the INR manual, so please be familiar with that. If you have a more complicated system, obviously required a detailed sequence of operations and a test plan. Usually not as required with PV systems. Typically that's more fuel cells, CHP systems, post-transition emergency generators, things of that nature, but those are other items that the more detailed, the better we can understand the system. Same thing with systems that might require any kind of relays. Again, here's a quick screen capture of the 20 or less guidelines and the fast track guidelines up there, available for you to view and download from the Eversource and UI websites. And again, on the Eversource website, you'll see the link to the new online application form that will direct you through the PowerPoint system. And lastly, if there are any general questions for Eversource, please send them to ctdg@eversource.com and to uiggenerator.interconnection@uinet.com.
I just would like to add, if you have any questions, once again directed for UI, generators.connection@uinet.com, but you can also find information on our website, which is about UI and distributed generation, which includes guidelines, application link, and all other information.
Are there any questions, or do we move on to the next section?
No, there's no questions that I could see.
Excellent. You're doing a good job then.
Oh, yeah, apologies. This slide says that Greg Pittman is going to be covering this. However, James is going to be standing in for Greg as he was unable to make it today. So if there are any, James is doing this as a favor, if there are any very specific metering questions from Eversource's perspective, please submit them to LREC.ZREC@eversource.com, and we will direct them to the correct party and try and get you an answer. But again, thank you, James, for standing in for Greg today.
Sure. You're welcome. Okay, so yes, I'm standing in for Greg Piven to do this section as well. So I want to stress that I'm by no means a meter engineering expert, but certainly I work hand in hand with Greg on all of the reviews for interconnection as far as net metering, and then also as far as LREC, ZREC metering design. So I'm fairly familiar with these requirements and some of the technical aspects, but if you have very, very detailed technical questions, again, those will probably have to go Greg's way after today's presentation. Okay, so getting on to the first slide, Again, contact information is critical. Within the LREC ZREC procedures, you'll see that there is a section covering ZREC metering requirements. We're going to go through some of the differences between self-contained REC metering versus instrument-rated REC metering, some of the various options that are available for metering, and as well what the process is for validating REC meters. So again, please refer to the NPREC document that is located on the LREC ZREC webpage, and if you have specific questions, the correct email is meterengineering@eversource.com. So here you see the chart that is available to you in that document for the various types of REC meters and the groups they fall into. So if we're talking, these are obviously slides of more technical nature, but for projects that are over 500 kW, you are needing the interval recording IN8650C meter, and that's a case where you're procuring the meter and all those materials on your own and providing Eversource with a $315 fee for us to program the meter remotely once you have communications established. For all projects lower than that, that's where you are purchasing, at least in the case of your LREC ZREC projects with Eversource, you're purchasing the meter from Eversource based on our review of the design and based on our recommendations. So you'll see here that there's different classifications. It is the preference of Eversource that the lowest cost solution be utilized unless there is a good reason not to. So in most cases, for anything under 500, that will be a scalar meter, which will be a high-powered radio frequency meter. That is why we typically are insisting that meter be installed in an exterior ground level location. So if it needs to be accessed by us for some reason, we can. And so that reading of the radio frequency from the meter can be easily accomplished by our drive-by vans, same as we do with our billing meters. And that other more complex meters that require cellular or modem communications or that require interval recording, those would be far less likely to be needed, again, unless there are circumstances that dictate that. So in most cases, again, please assume that you can design this and only need scalar readings once a month based on a high-powered radio frequency meter that is placed exterior ground level. So again, this just, again, outlines some of the sizes that make things fall into certain categories. Our self-contained meters are rated up to 320 amps, so when you do your calculations on what your PV system is going to generate, generally if it's 320 amps or less, you're talking about a self-contained meter, where if you're talking over 320 amps, that's when you're going to need to go to a CT-based meter, where you're going to need to purchase and install CTs, possibly VTs as well. But in terms of cost, I'm not sure if it's on a subsequent slide, but typically we are charging $208 for these scalar or ERT-based single-phase meters, and typically $266 for the three-phase self-contained high-powered ERT meters. The cellular recording and modem-based meters are more expensive than that. We don't do very many of those, but those are somewhat significantly more pricey, I think in the range of about $900 or so for the three-phase cellular modem-based meters. It's just off the top of my head. I don't have that number memorized, but that's why it certainly is to your benefit as a lowest cost solution to go with the self-contained, or with the, more importantly, with the high-powered ERT meters, as they are fairly inexpensive to purchase from us. Moving on to the next slide. So again, different types of meters. There's self-contained, single-phase and three-phase meters. Single-phase 12240 volts, Form 2S, 3-wire. We can issue those as Class 200 or Class 320 meters, and those are 4-terminal self-contained sockets. The three-phase can be 122.8 or 277-480. So those are typically the Form 16S socket, 4-wire. Class 200 or Class 320 is a 7-terminal socket. And when you go to those those IT-rated meters, that's when you are required to purchase the CTs yourself, and in the case of the 480-volt situations, also purchase the VTs yourself. So you will communicate that through someone like myself, the DG project manager, for purchase of the meter. So if your project's already interconnected, already energized, you would simply be following up by emailing either ctdg@eversource.com and indicating that you now have a REC contract for an already interconnected system and that you wish to proceed with the ZREC meter review process. If we already have drawings on record that have all the details, we can simply proceed with having them reviewed officially for ZREC purposes. However, if previously your interconnection drawings did not have that information, you'll be required to update those drawings with required information and send those to the appropriate DG project manager that will handle that review. Again, we prefer the high-powered ERP meters that can simply operate with a drive-by meter read technology where we pick up the radio frequency signal. If they're placed inside, that's where we have a difficulty or potential difficulty for picking up those high-powered meter readings. So our preference is always outside. If there are extenuating circumstances where it must, for some reason, be installed in the interior, we'll review that on a case-by-case basis and determine if we can then go or must go to a cellular or a phone line type of meter. So what do you have to show on your line diagram? Doesn't mean that you have to provide a full 3-line diagram, because for interconnection, you're only required to show a 1-line, but you can provide 3-line detail on the 1-line or in the form of just an extra detail on that same page that indicates to us that you're showing the proper type of meter, again, being at a form 16S or 9S, whatever the case may be, with the correct type of 3-line information, showing things such as, in the case of instrument-rated polarity markings and CT or VT sizes, and in the case of all meters, showing that you're properly wiring it so that it's line or top side coming from the inverters and load or bottom side going towards the grid. And as well, that site plan that's provided should also clearly identify the location, the proposed location of that ZREC meter should be ground level exterior. If we see something that is other than that, we are going to question why that is needed and decide if we will allow that on a case-by-case basis. So when you get to beyond certain requirements beyond 320 amps, that's when things will need to be IT rated. So in the case of single phase, that's a form 4S. In the case of 3-phase, that's a form 9S. And that's where, again, if it's 277-480, you're going to need to put in voltage transformers of a 2.4 to 1 ratio to take that voltage down. Anything above 320 amps is going to need to be IT rated. So you're going to need to provide us with cut sheets of the proposed CTs and VTs that you intend to purchase and install. If possible, provide those if you know you have a ZREC contract when you are applying for interconnection, then there's no reason why you can't provide us during the interconnection review process when we ask for ZREC review with those cut sheets, and there's no reason why you can't show, again, those 3-line details and spec out your proposed CT and VT ratios on the drawing. We will have, obviously, meter engineering will review that, and if we concur that we agree with that the ratios are correct or sufficient, we will approve it. However, if we find that the ratios are not in keeping with what they should be, we will determine and recommend that that be adjusted and the drawings be revised. And as well, if we feel that the proposed CTs or VTs don't meet the requirements for accuracy and range as dictated by the program, we will also select a different model. As well, those must be solid core CTs only. We do not allow, and they have to be a single ratio. Those can't be adjustable, and they cannot be split core CTs. Not even sure what the next bullet means, so I'll leave that to Greg if he has to answer that at some later date. And again, you can contact your DG project manager because we're the ones that will be collecting the payment for the REC meter. And in the Eversource contingent approval, typically, again, we are telling you what that meter costs, and we're asking you for information on where you want that meter shipped to. So again, the 3-line drawing should show the metering circuits, the current and transformer ratios, and the polarity markings clearly marked, and they should be pointing towards the generator. Cut sheets, you're going to want to make sure you're actually circling and clearly indicating which model is. Often the cut sheets have multiple models on them. So again, should clearly show the location of that REC meter, and because, again, we want the majority to be the high-powered ERC, we would like that exterior grid level and preferably even facing the street. So typically, again, near that AC emerging disconnect switch is typically a very good location to put that REC meter. So if you are into the high-end metering, again, projects that are more complex in nature, so if they utilize natural gas, if they're greater than 500 kW, or if you have generation that exceeds 250 kW and has multiple types of generation, then we are sometimes, then we'll be required to basically differentiate between, say, if you have both a PV system and a fuel cell or a CHP unit behind that same billing meter. We may at that point then require that the ZREC meter be a interval recording meter so that we can excess generation that is going out to the grid from a PV source versus a different type of so again, 3 current transformers, 3 voltage transformers are required in those cases, 2.4 to 1 ratio preferred, and again, 3% minimum accuracy, and we always want the lowest ratio, the highest rating factor, must be single ratio of solid. Again, verifying that shunt trips are in the open position, and for primary primary metered site. For billing meter purposes, the REC meter cannot be at that primary voltage. It must be at the secondary voltage. We would also recommend, I know this isn't on the slide, but I've certainly seen where, I'll give you certain cases where customers or contractors have designed a 480, 277 volt system where the inverters are at the higher 277 voltage, but the service voltage is at 122.8, so they have a customer-owned transformer to take down the voltage. We would always, in those cases, recommend that the REC meter be placed on the high side of that customer-owned transformer, as close to the inverters as possible. That's just good design practice because it's going to minimize the potential losses. So it's going to essentially get the most bang for your buck on that REC design, and is also going to obviously increase chances that the amperage will be lower, and therefore you'll have the opportunity to put in one of those self-contained options, as opposed to if you put it on that 208 volt side of the customer transformer, chances are your amperage is going to be higher, and now you have to go to the more complicated 9S IT rated configuration where now you're purchasing those CTs and having to show more detail. So it's just better for everybody if you keep it on that higher side closer to the generator, where there's more likelihood you can go with a self-contained option. So again, what is required, the line diagram has to clearly show the generator size and the voltages, has to clearly show those ratios on the CTs and the VTs and those polarity markings, and providing us with accurate data sheets that have the models clearly circled. In the case of just the ION 8650C meters, and those are the projects, again, they're over 500 kW, you are required for proper programming to provide us with the ION meter serial number. And when you set up the communications for those ION meters, you do have to provide us with the static public IP address, gateway, and subnet mask. I'm not a metering expert, so honestly, I don't know what any of that means other than knowing you have an IP address. Don't ask me what a gateway or subnet mask is, but I'm sure that Greg Piven or one of the folks in our meter engineering department can tell you all about that stuff. So again, after the ZREC meter is installed and you've got everything properly hooked up, based on the design plans you submitted that we reviewed and approved, you will then need to verify that the meter is operating properly. So in the case of anything under 500 kW, anything that's not an ION 8650C meter, you are filling out an email, and there again is a one-page sheet that has a picture of a meter that's part of those ZREC meter requirements, that if you simply fill out that form and scan it and send it to meterengineering@eversource.com, and again, I stress, send it to meter engineering, not to the DG group. We don't do that validation, meter engineering does. So we try to always include our document, the metering procedures document, with our design approvals in the DG group, but we do try to clearly direct you to that verification process is done with meter engineering. So you're going to fill out that validation form with all the relevant information, showing, recorded, that information is being recorded on the correct channels. And then once you send that into meter engineering, they will review and respond with an email that says we have validated that this metering is operating properly, and that is an email that you're later providing to the RTR group to help complete your verification process and get your payments. Those that falls in the B category, cellular modem, Ethernet communications, that will be an email from the meter engineering group after you've gone through the process with them, again, indicating those communication requirements have been met, that the modem or the cellular connection is operating properly, and in the case of the IN8650C meters, they've been able to go in through the protocols are set up correctly, and they're able to verify and see the data and verify they will send that email back to you. And that is all that I have been covering for Greg on this section, so I'm not sure if there are any questions. Okay.
We don't have any questions, but I encourage anyone that has last minute questions to please submit them.
I will go briefly about our UI metering requirements. Like I said briefly, if you have any question, you can direct any question to LREC.ZREC@uinet.com, or you can also refer to the website that is listed under Doing Business with UI and LREC ZREC program information and documents. You will be able to see interconnection and metering information there, as well as you can see metering requirements for LREC and ZREC. So, all installation must follow the UI guideline book of requirements for electric service. All installation must follow the guidelines for interconnection. Installation shall meet published requirements for accessibility and location. The cost responsibilities, UI will own, install, lease, and maintain all meters and metering transformers in service territory, which is different from program participants. Their costs will provide meter provisions and needed instruments LREC ZREC metering requirements document is located, once again, as I stated earlier, on UI LREC ZREC program information and documents webpage. Multiple provisions cabinets may be required. Requirements for multiple provisions cabinets will be made by UI staff during early design meetings with installers. If the customer participates in net energy rider, additional metering information might be required. LREC ZREC meters will be located after any inverters and before any load. Power storage equipment, battery bank, and charger must be located between the generator and the inverter. Installation with power storage equipment will be net energy measurement. Meter data. Revenue meter data will be provided monthly to customers, including net energy pursuant to customer's tariff. UI will provide monthly or for determination of site generation. I just wanted to mention, unfortunately, we do not have the same capability as Eversource to obtain the meter data. We do have options to go through third party, but unfortunately there is a fee associated with it. Just email us, we can provide you with information if necessary.
You could also always go into NEPOOL, into your NEPOOL account and see what was uploaded for you if you're really concerned with the number of RECs. That's an option for both UI and Eversource. But it is on a quarterly basis, so you would have to wait until the information was up there.
All right. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. We have on the screen, we've provided again, if you have any questions, please submit them via email only to LREC@eversource.com. The majority of the questions were answered during this presentation. However, there are some very project-specific questions that we received that we will be answering on an individual basis. Therefore, we will not be sending a master list of the questions because we answered them all throughout the presentation. But again, if you have specifics about a given project, we're happy to go through those scenarios, and we'll do them we'll go through them offline so we can get you guys some specific answers. But let's see, the key documents the amended solicitation plan was revised as of August 3rd, and that's available on our website. The standard contract is also available on our website, so I apologize that they're not linked here, however, they are available on the Eversource website, and I believe they're available on the UI website as well. If you need links to them, you can send us an email, we'll send you the direct link. The acceptable forms and methods of providing performance assurance document is linked there. Our Q&A and the overview of the ZREC program are also linked. Just quickly, you'll notice that at the end of this presentation, the rates and riders for customers with distributed generation portion, i.e. net metering and virtual net metering, they are provided there for your reference only. Unfortunately, neither party from either of our companies were able to make it to today's presentation, so the information is there. If you have any questions that are specific to net metering or virtual net metering, unfortunately, we will not be able to answer them today. However, you can submit them to the various companies. For Eversource, Jim Merzejewski, James.Merzejewski at Eversource.com. And UI is mark.colta@uinet.com, and their email addresses and correct spellings of their names are included on the last slide of this presentation.
I just wanted to jump in here quick, Laura. I know that we've been getting some calls and some general emails. I know there's talk in the state and in the legislature about possible changes to net metering. I want to stress, please don't contact or email the distributed generation, because I know there's a lot of hearsay and rumors out there about where the future of net metering is going. While I'm aware that there's some talk and there may be some things in the legislature of PURA about possible changes to net metering guidelines. Please understand that us at the staffing level are not privy to what the legislature is doing or what discussions are being had at PURA regarding any potential changes to net metering. So if you have a specific question or you're concerned about changes to net metering, please do make sure that you utilize those email addresses. I know that James Merzejewski and James Serkanowicz cannot be confused since we're both James with big Polish last names. But so just make sure if you have a rates question or you're wondering about the future of net metering, please don't email CTDG or please don't call our hotline number. We are not privy to what is going to happen. No one has a crystal ball. But if there are changes that are going through either the legislature or PURA, these email addresses you see on this slide are certainly your best resources to know what potential changes there are.
So just as a reminder, as we stated earlier, the Connecticut legislature passed Public Act 1850. The Public Utility Regulatory Authority has opened an informational docket under 180615. There's a technical meeting Friday, August 17th. There was an initial meeting on January 23rd, I believe. I think that I believe CPN covered that initial technical meeting, and you can watch that, or you can participate in the August 17th technical meeting, which is beginning. I believe that is a informational meeting regarding metering and billing, kind of 101 and load settlement understanding for the Public Utility Regulatory Authority, which will be participated with representatives from Connecticut Light and Power, United Illuminating, and the Bank. As far as entities I know, will be speaking at least at that technical meeting on Friday.
All right, thank you all very much, and we look forward to your participation in the Year 7 RFP.